Thyroxine is one of the thyroid hormones which have far-reaching effects on the human body, including growth, development, metabolic rate, and heat production. Thyroid hormone levels are the cause of well-known disorders like hypo and hypothyroidism, which about 6% of the US adult population has. Thyroxine is the most commonly released thyroid hormone. Today I'm going to explain what this hormone is and what it does at 3 levels. Let's begin. Level 1. Child. Have you ever mixed colored cake icing? When you do, you take a bowl full of white icing and you take your little vial of dye. You squeeze the teeniest, tiniest little drop of this dye into your icing, like that, and then you mix it up, and eventually the entire bowl will change colors. This is similar to what a hormone does. See, now it's a lovely shade of pink. Thyroxine is a hormone, which is a little particle that can have really big effects on your body. And like our dye, it comes from a little teeny tiny organ, your thyroid gland, which is located in your neck. From the thyroid gland, it spreads all through your body in the blood. It spreads out evenly to every part of your body. When it gets somewhere, like your muscles or your skin, it affects your DNA. Your DNA is like your body's instruction manual. And thyroxine tells your body what parts to read. This means it can tell your body to do things like heat up, breathe faster, or get really excited. Sometimes, though, your thyroid gland doesn't work right and it can produce the wrong amount of thyroxine. When it doesn't produce enough, you get cold all the time, feel sleepy, and can gain weight. This is a disease, and it's called hypothyroidism. When your thyroid produces too much thyroxine, it's called hypothyroidism instead. And that's mostly the opposite. You get very hot easily, can lose the weight, and have trouble sleeping. Level 2. Teen. Thyroxine is a hormone, a compound produced by the body to regulate function and transported in the blood. Thyroxine is the most common thyroid hormone, secreted by the thyroid gland, a butterfly-shaped organ in your lower neck. It travels through the bloodstream to all the cells in your body. Once it reaches a cell, it is transported across the membrane by a protein. In the cell, it is converted to triiodothyronine, also called T3, the active form, which is also a thyroid hormone. Thyroxine can also be called T4, just as triiodothyronine is called T3. T3 binds to a thyroid hormone receptor in the cell. The receptor is a protein that, when bound with T3, will bind DNA at specific sites to induce gene transcription, which will result in an increased production of specific body proteins. The proteins thyroxine and T3 boost result in greater heart rate and blood flow, faster breathing, faster metabolism, especially the breakdown of proteins and carbohydrates, heat production, increased sensitivity to catecholamines, which are other hormones including adrenaline. It also has some effect on the development of your brain. Thyroxine levels must be tightly regulated by the body, or it can cause diseases. When thyroid hormone levels are too low, it is called hypothyroidism. Symptoms vary, but may include poor ability to tolerate cold, tiredness, constipation, depression, or weight gain. Hypothyroidism can also cause brain damage in infants. High levels of thyroid hormones are referred to as hyperthyroidism, which can cause heat intolerance, irritability, muscle weakness, sleeping problems, rapid heart rate, diarrhea, muscle tremors, and weight loss. Level 3. College. Thyroxine, or T4, is the most common thyroid hormone. It is secreted by the thyroid gland in response to thyroid-stimulating hormone, TSH. Triiodothyronine, or T3, is the other thyroid hormone. Much more T4 than T3 is secreted by the thyroid, which is why it is the most common hormone, because thyroxine is more stable than T3, and generally it will be converted to T3 within the cells. When thyroxine is released into the bloodstream, most of it is bound to transport proteins, 70% to thyroxine-binding globulin, or TBG, and the rest to transthyretin, or albumin. Once it reaches the target cell, thyroxine is transported across the membrane. Although extremely hydrophobic, thyroxine is also highly charged, so it requires a transport protein to cross the membrane. Thyroxine uses several different transport proteins. It's a prohormone, or an inactive precursor form of a hormone. So once inside the cell, it will be converted to D3, the active form of the hormone. This process is catalyzed by deiodinases, D1 and D2, which remove an iodine moiety from thyroxine. D2 is the dominant deiodinase, with D1 appearing to catalyze the reaction in both directions equally. T3 will then bind to a thyroid hormone receptor. These proteins are hormone-activated transcription factors. Thyroid hormone receptors in mammals are encoded by two genes, alpha and beta. The primary transcript of each of these genes can also be subject to alternative splicing. So you have two different alpha and beta receptor isoforms, which gives us alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, and beta 2. The different forms of thyroid receptors have patterns of expression that may vary by tissue and by developmental stage. For example, almost all tissues express the alpha 1, alpha 2, and beta 1 isoforms, but beta 2 is synthesized almost exclusively in the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, and the developing ear. Receptor alpha 1 is the first isoform expressed in the embryo, and there's a large increase in expression of beta receptors in the brain shortly after birth. These receptors have different DNA binding site affinities as well. For example, those beta receptors will preferentially activate expression from several genes known to be important in brain development. Thyroid hormone receptors bind to short, repeated sequences of DNA called thyroid or T3 response elements, or TREs. These sites include two AGGTCA half sites separated by 4 nucleotides. They can be palindromic or in the same order. Thyroid hormone receptors can bind to a TRE as a monomer, as a homodimer with 2 thyroid hormone receptors, or as heterodimers with 1 thyroid hormone receptor and 1 retinoid X receptor, RXR, a similar nuclear receptor that binds retinoic acid instead. Thyroid hormone receptors bind TRE DNA regardless of whether they are occupied by T3. But binding of the thyroid hormone receptor alone to DNA usually leads to a repression of the transcription, whereas the binding will activate transcription.